Traci, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this amazing project. I've gotten a chance in the whirlwind of the last 24 hours to catch a couple of episodes, and I'm blown away already. I'm curious about you and your history and why you wanted to tell this story. Do you have a special connection to New Orleans?
Well, I do now. My many trips and visits for this project, and I've been a few times before, but I just came to understand the city in a very different way. And I just have a very deep and profound love for that place and the people in New Orleans. I have traveled a lot around the world, and you're just not going to find better people than the people in New Orleans. I think the opportunity to tell this story was really appealing to me for a few reasons. I really like to kind of tell a sprawling story that has like lots of layers and moving parts. And I really enjoy the challenge of kind of wrangling all of that. But I also, in my work, am interested in exploring the ways that sort of systems and institutions can kind of constrain the conditions of our lives, because I think a lot of times it happens very invisibly. And we like to sort of point to individual actors because systems and institutions are kind of hard to get your hands around. Like it just kind of feels like this sort of elusive thing. And so I'm really interested in my work in the ways in which trying to make the invisible feel visible and make the implicit feel explicit. And so this was an opportunity to do that and to also do it in a way that restores this story to the people of New Orleans, because I think there's a way that we meaning those of us who experienced Katrina as viewers, remember Katrina as something that happened to America sort of writ large. And it really wasn't. It was something that happened to these people in this particular city in ways that continue to kind of reverberate in their lives 20 years on.
Oh my gosh, you're so right about that. And watching that, I realized that, you feel like, but this is where I was during Katrina, but it doesn't matter because I wasn't there. So tell me about kind of the process and there are so many moving parts. How did you find this cast of characters to talk to? How did you decide who to talk to?
Yeah, well, so a couple things. There were a few trips to New Orleans. One that I was just there for Essence Festival the summer before, and I just knew that I was going to start this project, and I started talking to local people that I met there. Um, and one of the things that I heard consistently, and this is different people in different sort of parts of the city, was that to those of us who go to New Orleans as visitors, as tourists, New Orleans feels like New Orleans always has, or like the New Orleans of our imagination. It matches with our experience. So it's Mardi Gras, it's Jazz Fest, it's Bourbon Street, it's all the things. But for the people who are from there, they kind of have this bifurcated experience of their city as before Katrina and after Katrina to this day. And so that sort of let me know, okay, we need to tell a story that is a people's story. That's sort of the way that I think of it. I really wasn't interested in like your federal people and like your presidents and your governors and all of those folks. Like I really wanted to allow the people of New Orleans to speak for themselves and tell the story as they experienced it, because I think the rest of us had a lot to learn from them. They're deeply knowledgeable about their own city. Then on another trip, we met with General Honore, who you see in the series, who I think is just a favorite of everybody.
Everybody knows him.
And one of the things that General Honore told us, and I visited with Miles, our showrunner, and Laura Dodd, our New Orleans-based producer, is that what Katrina was what you experienced, where you were, where you stood in it. And so that sort of let me know that Katrina was not an experience, it was many different experiences. Like there's almost as many Katrina stories as there are Katrina survivors as people who lived it. So I understood that we needed to kind of collect as many of these different pieces of the story to even begin trying to come up with something that conveyed what the whole of it was. And so some of it was like, literally, where were you? Were you in the Superdome? Were you in the convention center? Were you stuck in your house? Were you on the highway? Were you a first responder that just kind of got out there and did it? Were you someone that got a boat and started saving your neighbors? Were you a member of city government? And so we knew that we had to kind of collect all of those different pieces. So that sort of informed, the kind of people that we were looking for to tell the story. And so one of the great things about New Orleans is that people there are sort of natural raconteurs, natural storytellers. It's something in the culture. So, I want to say that, like, oh, it was just difficult finding all of these wonderful people. And it was challenging finding them. But once we did, it sort of was inevitable that they were going to be the fantastic storytellers that they are, because that's just sort of the nature of New Orleans. And then the other thing was we wanted to try to, as much as possible, tell a whole city story, because this is an entire American city that was underwater, 80% of the city that was underwater. And I think at the time the media focus was on certain parts of the city, but you're talking about every neighborhood from the westernmost point of the city to the easternmost point of the city that was underwater. And New Orleans is really this patchwork of neighborhoods that all have their unique sort of thing. And also where you were during Katrina really informed a lot of what your experience was. So just with that understanding that there are all these kind of moving pieces and then figuring out what those pieces were, that really sort of helped us begin to approach like who we wanted to talk to and how we wanted to tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, spot on. That was amazing. I learned so much just from the timeline, having the clock up, and then the zoom in on the maps, because you're right. Like, all we ever heard really was lower ninth, lower ninth. There's so much more to this story. And it was really interesting to see a picture of the neighborhood and then hear from a resident who lived it. Like,
Yes.
it was so educational. You know, it's been 20 years. There's been numerous documentaries about Katrina. So what makes this one a little different, aside from what you kind of already hinted at?
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of began with what I thought I knew. And this is sort of always my process. And then I like to take 10 steps back from that because I like to sort of challenge my own assumptions and my own understandings. And in doing the research, one of the things that really emerged for me was that, yes, we know that there is this sort of man-made barrier, kind of the concrete barrier of the levees that was compromised by the inadequacy of the way the Army Corps of Engineers built them. But one of the things that was less apparent was that I kind of thought about it as the sort of concentric rings of protection that were failing. So there's sort of the, ring of protection of like making sure people can get out of the city or that they're protected. Then there's like the physical man-made barrier of the levees. But beyond that, if you pull all the way out, there was this natural barrier, which was the coastal lands on outside of Louisiana that had always sort of protected New Orleans and the coastline from the full force of a hurricane, because when the hurricanes build power as they pick up water, as they move across water, and those bits of land would always sort of stop the hurricane. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't leave, because in New Orleans they had been accustomed to this sort of chicken little, like the sky's falling, the big one is coming, and then it either wouldn't come or it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And so once I realized that, I was like, oh, there's something new to add to our understanding of the story, which is that this is a story of environmental justice, right? And I think um, realizing that allows us not only to add something new to the story of Katrina, but to put the story of Katrina in conversation with where we find ourselves today, which is to say that even since we started making this series, we've had in Asheville, North Carolina, a flood of that city. We've had the fires in Lahaina and the fires in LA. And while there's sort of the circumstances are different from Katrina, the contours of the story are the same, which is to say you have these extreme weather events that have been exacerbated by man-made impacts on the environment. Those events encounter infrastructure that was never designed to withstand the strength of these events. And then what happens is that the people who are most vulnerable on the front end of the storm, for whatever reasons, and we get into some of those in the series, have the most difficult time recovering on the back end. And so it really kind of allowed us to tease out sort of what I was saying earlier about those sort of structural and institutional things, because we see in the storm that the story that the flood did not discriminate. All races, all classes, like everybody lost a lot. But the recovery is where we sort of begin to see how some of those structures and institutions create a disparate outcome for some people and not others. So anyway, I've just sort of been rambling
No,
about.
you answered like four questions at once. You know,
Yeah,
like why should we revisit a tragic thing from 20
yeah,
years ago? But that's it. I mean, you
yeah.
nailed it. Like that environmental piece was so huge, such a part of the series that you're right. I haven't seen others do. It was great. This, I know you're not new to heavy topics and directing things like this, but the emotional wear this must put on you too as well. What was that process like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been like, I got asked this several times actually at our premiere in New Orleans. And I guess I haven't, maybe I need therapy. I don't know. I
Maybe
haven't
this is your therapy.
I haven't really given it much thought. And I also, when we made Attica, this is also a question that I got. And I guess my feeling is that if the people who survived it can have sort of the strength and the grace and the fortitude to revisit all of this with me and with the teams that I work with for the sake of telling the story and so that it might be known and that the truth might be known, the least I can do is sit through it with them. There wasn't a single interview where there were not tears, including my own. But I think that's okay. I think it is right to feel disturbed and uncomfortable with it. I don't necessarily think that I would want to feel okay about doing any of this work. And so I don't know, I feel like it's a privilege to be able to do this and to be able to allow people to have this platform. And if part of what goes along with that is some difficulty or discomfort for me in being with it, then I think that feels okay to me.
So what's next for you? Any new projects you can share about?
Yes, actually, yeah. The announcement came out, I think, last week. I'm directing a film with Stevie Wonder, which is mind blowing. That is the untold story of the movement to create the MLK holiday and Stevie's leadership in that movement. So it is very exciting. I just got back from London with meeting with him and getting the project started. So I'm really looking forward to telling that story.
Awesome. Traci, is there anything else you want to share about this project?
No, I hope, my biggest concern was how the people of New Orleans and the people who were in it feel about it, and the hope that they feel like we got it right. And after kind of premiering it with them in New Orleans, it feels like they did that they're happy with how we told the story. And I hope that everyone else watches it sees them in a way that they were not seen at the time. We see in the story that there were some dehumanizing kind of narratives about the way the people of New Orleans comported themselves during this incident. And I hope that we've done a good job and that people understand the truth, which is that the way they responded to this incident was extraordinary, that these ties of kinship and community that they have in the worst of circumstances did not break them. And so that really is my biggest hope, that these people, the people in the city, are seen for exactly who they are and the wonderful, amazing people that they are.
Awesome. Traci, thank you so much.
Thank you.